All right, so get ready because today we're diving headfirst into a fog bank.
A fog bank.
Yeah, a fog bank, like a literal one, but also one of mystery.
Oh, I see what you're doing there.
You've probably seen the reports about this fog. I mean, it's not your average morning mist, you know?
Right, right.
This is something else, something unusual. And it's got everyone talking, I mean, from chemtrails
Oh, yeah, those are always a hot topic.
to smart dust to, well, to the government.
Of course. Gotta love a good government conspiracy.
Oh, yeah. So today we're going to unpack two totally different takes on this whole fog phenomenon. So get ready to wade through it with us.
Sounds interesting.
It is. It really is. So the two sources we're diving into today are, well, let's just say they come from very different perspectives.
That's usually how it goes with these things, right? Two sides of the same coin.
Exactly. So first up, we've got Richard. He's a commentator who's always digging into societal trends, kind of with a healthy dose of skepticism.
Skepticism is good, but sometimes it leads down a rabbit hole.
Oh, it totally does. And Richard, well, he's not afraid to go down that rabbit hole, especially when it comes to conspiracies.
Yeah, I've seen some of his stuff.
Then on the flip side, we have Shane. Now, Shane comes from a law enforcement background, but now he's more of a Christian commentator.
Interesting.
Yeah, he tends to focus on like transparency and accountability, really pushing for action.
I can see how that perspective would clash with Richard's.
Oh, it totally does. So to kick things off, Richard starts his video by reading an email from a viewer named Barry.
Okay.
Now, Barry's a self-proclaimed skeptic, and he basically calls Richard out, like, come on, Richard, these chemtrails you're so worried about, it's just condensation trails, like your breath on a cold day.
Makes sense. It's the simplest explanation, right? Occam's razor.
Right, exactly. And Barry goes on, he's like, and if the government really was spraying us with all this harmful stuff, wouldn't we, like, be feeling the effects by now?
It's a valid question. You'd think there'd be some obvious, widespread consequences.
Exactly. But the thing is, Richard doesn't back down, even after reading Barry's email.
Really?
Yeah.
So he's doubling down on the chemtrail theory.
Oh, yeah, but with a touch of sarcasm, like he's almost poking fun at Barry's skepticism.
I see. So he's not letting go of that theory.
Yeah.
What else does he bring up?
Well, then he brings up this article from sports.com, and the title is a mouthful. It's like, what is smart dust? Conspiracy theories surrounding a normal fog enveloping the globe intensifies.
Wow. Okay, so we're talking global fog now. This is getting interesting.
Oh, yeah, it gets even better. The article talks about this thick fog blanketing the UK, the USA, Canada, everywhere.
That's a pretty widespread phenomenon. Is there any explanation for why it's happening?
Well, that's the mystery, right? People are calling it FogVid24 because apparently a lot of people are getting sick during this time.
FogVid24. That's a catchy name. What kind of illnesses are we talking about?
It's mostly like cold and flu symptoms, that sort of thing. But there have even been some reports of strokes.
Strokes? That's serious. I mean, a fog causing strokes, something doesn't add up.
Right. It's all very strange. And Richard even chimes in and says that he was feeling ill around the same time as this fog.
Oh, really? What kind of symptoms was he experiencing?
He described it as more of a toxin rather than like the flu.
A toxin. That's a bit vague, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But it adds to the whole mystery, right? Like, what was in this fog that made him feel so sick?
I see his point, though. I mean, if it wasn't like a normal cold or flu, it does make you wonder what else could have been going on.
Exactly. And the article goes on to list all sorts of wild theories that are swirling around online. I mean, everything from alien spores.
Alien spores. Seriously.
Yeah, I know. It sounds crazy. But then there's also talk of like chemical attacks, even a methane explosion.
Wow, the speculation is running wild, isn't it? Any of those theories hold any water?
Well, that's the thing. There's no real evidence to support any of them. But the one that Richard really latches onto is smart dust.
Smart dust. Now, that's something I haven't heard of before. What is that? Some kind of new cleaning product?
Not quite. It's actually, well, this is where things get really interesting.
Okay, I'm all ears.
So Richard mentions DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of them. They're the ones who come up with all those, like, futuristic military technologies, right?
Exactly. And apparently they hold a patent for smart dust technology. And get this, the patent dates back to the 90s.
The 90s. Wow. So this smart dust thing has been around for a while then. But what exactly is it? I mean, is it like actual dust that's smart?
Well, sort of. It's more like tiny microscopic devices that can float around in the air.
Microscopic devices. That sounds like something straight out of a science fiction movie.
I know, right? It's pretty mind-blowing. And Richard's suggesting that this fog could be, well, composed of these smart dust particles.
Hold on. So he's saying that this fog that's blanketing the globe, making people sick, could be made up of these tiny, invisible devices.
That's his theory, yeah. And it's a pretty unsettling thought, isn't it?
It definitely is.
Mm.
I mean, what even is smart dust? What can it do? And if it's real, why would it be in this fog? There are so many questions.
I know, right? It's like we've stumbled into a real-life X-Files episode.
Exactly. So before we spiral down the rabbit hole of microscopic robots and government conspiracies, let's hear what Shane has to say about this fog. Maybe he could shed some light on this from a different angle.
Good idea. Let's get a different perspective on this. It's time for Shane's take on FogVid24.
All right, let's see what Shane has to say about this mysterious fog. He's usually got a more grounded approach to these things.
Yeah, he does. But this time, even Shane's got some pretty wild stuff to share.
Oh, I'm intrigued. Tell me more.
So unlike Richard, Shane's doing a live stream on New Year's Eve, 2024.
Okay, live stream New Year's Eve. What's he talking about?
Well, he's talking about the fog, of course, but the interesting part is that he's asking his viewers to call in and share their experiences with it.
That's a smart move. Get a pulse on what people are actually experiencing out there.
Right, and what's crazy is the range of reports he gets. People are describing all sorts of strange things.
Oh, like what? Are they seeing those alien spores Richard was talking about?
No, quite. It's more about the smell of the fog. Some people are saying it smells like burnt tires, others like chemicals. Some even say it smells like sulfur.
Sulfur?
Mm.
That's a bit unsettling, isn't it? I mean, it makes you think of volcanoes and, well, other unpleasant things.
Yeah, it's definitely not your typical foggy morning smell. And you know what else? Shane mentions feeling physically affected by the fog, too. Just like Richard.
Interesting. What kind of effects?
He says it feels like he's having an allergic reaction to something in the air.
So we've got two guys both feeling off, both sensing something strange about this fog, but they have very different explanations, right?
Exactly. And this is where Shane throws a curveball. He's actually skeptical of the smart dust theory.
He is. That's surprising. I thought maybe he'd jump on that conspiracy train with Richard.
Nope. He says he hasn't seen enough evidence to support it. Instead, he focuses on something else. Weather modification.
Weather modification. You mean like cloud seeding? That's a real thing, isn't it?
It is, and Shane brings up a proposed bill in Florida, Senate Bill 56, which aims to ban all weather modification techniques.
A bill to ban weather modification. That sounds like something straight out of a conspiracy theorist playbook, not from a former law enforcement officer.
Right. That's what makes it so interesting. He's pointing to this bill as proof that something fishy is going on.
Hold on. This bill is real. It's not just some internet rumor.
It's real, sponsored by State Senator Ilana Garcia, a Republican from Miami.
Okay, so this isn't just some fringe idea. There's a real politician pushing for this ban. What's her reasoning?
Well, Shane quotes Senator Garcia saying, "As a leader in the community, I'm committed to addressing the real issues affecting our communities."
Okay, but that doesn't really explain why she wants to ban weather modification.
Right, and that's where Shane pulls up an article stating that scientists have been experimenting with weather modification for decades. They even mention cloud seeding, which you mentioned earlier, to increase rainfall or suppress hail.
So Shane is basically saying, look, this stuff is real and it's potentially dangerous, so let's ban it.
Exactly. And he takes it one step further. He asks his viewers, if this stuff didn't exist, why would it be recognized by the state?
He's using the existence of the bill as evidence for the existence of the practices it's trying to ban. That's a bold strategy.
It is. And then he urges his audience to contact their state governments and demand a ban on weather modification. He's not just talking about it, he's calling for action.
So we have Richard diving deep into the world of microscopic robots and shadowy government agencies. And then we have Shane, a former cop, calling for government transparency and a ban on potentially harmful technologies. It's a fascinating contrast, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Two very different perspectives, both raising valid points and both tapping into this underlying sense of unease about the fog and what it might represent. But before we go any further, we need to take a breather and unpack some of the key concepts they've thrown at us.
Yeah, good idea. We need to ground ourselves a bit before we get lost in the fog of speculation. FogVid24 is already giving me enough anxiety as it is.
Right. So stay tuned for part 2 of this deep dive, where we'll explore the science and the speculation behind weather modification and smart dust.
Can't wait to delve deeper into this. It's like peeling back the layers of a very strange onion. Who knows what we'll find at the center?
That's the fun part, right? The unknown. See you in part 2. All right, so we're back, ready to dive even deeper into this fog-filled mystery.
Deeper. I thought we were already pretty deep.
Oh, we're just getting started.
Okay, then lead the way.
Before we go full conspiracy mode, let's break down some of the stuff Richard and Shane talked about, starting with this whole weather modification thing.
Weather modification.
It sounds kind of crazy, right? Like controlling the weather, it's like something out of a movie.
It does sound like science fiction, but actually, as Shane pointed out, it's not a new concept.
Oh, yeah. I've heard of cloud seeding. That's a real thing, right?
Exactly. It's been around for decades.
So how does it work? Do they, shoot lasers into the clouds or something?
Not quite. It's more about dispersing substances, like silver iodide, into the clouds to enhance rainfall or, suppress hail.
So they're basically giving Mother Nature a little nudge.
Yeah, you could say that.
But isn't that kind of risky? I mean, messing with the weather like that?
Well, there are definitely concerns about unintended consequences.
Like what?
Well, for example, some people worry that manipulating weather patterns in one area could have unforeseen effects on neighboring regions.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
It's a complex issue, with both potential benefits and risks.
So there's a lot more to this weather modification thing than meets the eye. But I feel like Shane was hinting at something beyond cloud seeding, right? He kept bringing up chemtrails.
Yes, chemtrails, the ever-popular conspiracy theory.
Is it really just a conspiracy theory, though? I mean, is there any truth to it?
Well, the term chemtrails is often used to describe those long-lasting condensation trails left behind by aircraft, and the theory is that they contain harmful chemicals or agents being deliberately sprayed for, nefarious purposes.
Okay, so that's the theory. But what did the scientists say?
The scientific community overwhelmingly agrees that chemtrails, as they're described by conspiracy theorists, are not a real phenomenon.
So those trails are just condensed water vapor.
Exactly. Just like contrails, a natural byproduct of jet engines.
So why do people believe in chemtrails then?
Well, it's a complex issue, but it often boils down to a distrust of official explanations and a desire for alternative narratives, especially when people are faced with events that seem, inexplicable or unsettling.
So it's like they see these trails in the sky and they think, well, that can't just be water vapor. There must be something more sinister going on.
Right, and in the absence of clear and readily available information, people tend to fill the gaps with their own interpretations, which can sometimes lead to, well, conspiracy theories.
That makes sense. So on one hand, we have this scientifically grounded technique like cloud seeding.
Right, with a history and a purpose.
And on the other hand, we have this more fringe theory about chemtrails, which, well, lacks any real scientific backing.
It's a classic example of the challenges we face in navigating information in today's world.
We're constantly bombarded with information from all sides.
And it's not always easy to tell what's credible and what's not.
So how do we know what to believe?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? It's crucial to develop critical thinking skills, to be able to question information, to look for evidence, and to consider multiple perspectives.
So basically, don't just believe everything you read on the internet.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've talked about weather modification, both the real and the more speculative.
The scientifically proven and the conspiracy-laden.
Now let's shift gears and go back to Richard's theory about smart dust.
Ah, yes. Smart dust microscopic devices floating in the air.
It sounds kind of creepy, doesn't it? Like something out of a Black Mirror episode.
It definitely has that dystopian sci-fi vibe to it.
So how real is the smart dust thing? I mean, are we talking tiny robots spying on us?
Well, not exactly robots, but as Richard mentioned, DARPA has been researching miniaturized sensors and communication devices.
So tiny little sensors that can, what, collect data?
Exactly. They could theoretically collect data on things like temperature, pressure, light, even chemicals.
And transmit that data back to, who knows, the government.
Potentially, although the applications of this technology could extend far beyond surveillance.
Like what?
Well, imagine using these sensors for environmental monitoring, tracking pollution levels, or even monitoring structural integrity of buildings.
Okay, so there are some potential benefits to this technology.
Absolutely. But as with any powerful technology, there's always the potential for misuse.
Yeah, that's what worries me.
It's understandable to be cautious, especially when we're talking about technologies that could potentially erode our privacy.
Exactly. It's like, where do we draw the line?
That's a question we need to keep asking as technology continues to advance.
So this fog, whether it's natural or, something more engineered,
Or perhaps a bit of both.
It's really tapping into this deeper fear we have about the unknown, about the future,
It's like a symbol of our collective anxieties about the world we're creating.
and the technologies we're developing.
Right, technologies that have the power to both improve and potentially undermine our lives.
So what's the answer? How do we deal with this fear?
That's a tough question, but I think part of the answer lies in acknowledging that fear, in talking about it openly and honestly.
So not just ignoring it or pretending it's not there,
Exactly, because when we suppress our fears, they tend to fester and grow.
but if we confront them, we can maybe start to understand them better.
And maybe even find ways to address them constructively.
So this fog, this symbol of uncertainty,
This FogVid24 that's got us all spooked.
maybe it can be a catalyst for something positive.
A catalyst for dialogue, for critical thinking, for action.
I like that, turning fear into fuel.
It's a powerful concept, isn't it? Using our anxieties to drive positive change.
So, dear listener, what do you think is causing this unusual fog?
Is it a natural phenomenon
A sign of something more sinister?
or something else entirely?
We've given you two perspectives, Richard's deep dive into smart dust and Shane's call for transparency around weather modification.
Now it's up to you to dig deeper, to research further, to form your own conclusions.
Go check out the YouTube videos we mentioned, explore DARPA and their research, look into Senator Garcia's proposed bill.
There's a wealth of information out there waiting to be discovered.
And remember, this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Keep looking up, keep asking questions, and most importantly, stay curious.
The world is full of mysteries, and it's up to us to explore them.
And who knows, maybe in the process of unraveling these mysteries, we'll discover something even more profound about ourselves and the world around us.
Well said. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder the fog.
Until next time, keep exploring the unknown.
So we've been going pretty deep on this fog thing.
Deep, I'd say we've been swimming in it.
Right. Smart dust, weather modification. I mean, it's a lot.
It really makes you think, doesn't it?
It does. It really does.
You know, it's funny, but even though Richard and Shane have totally different takes on this whole thing, I feel like there's this common thread running through it all.
Oh, I see what you mean. Like, they're both coming at it from a place of, like, fear.
Exactly. Fear of the unknown, fear of losing control, fear of the future.
Richard's terrified of the government and technology, being used against us.
And Shane sees it as a sign of, like, a spiritual battle, a loss of moral compass.
Right, but they're both reacting to this feeling that the world is changing in ways they can't really understand.
And it scares them. It scares a lot of people.
It's like this fog, whatever it actually is, has become a symbol of all those anxieties.
It's a reflection of our collective fears, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, it's like we're all looking up at this hazy sky and seeing our own worst fears reflected back at us.
Which brings me to what I think is the most important takeaway from this whole deep dive.
Okay, I'm listening.
What if, instead of letting fear paralyze us, we use it as fuel? Fuel for curiosity, for critical thinking, for action.
You're saying we shouldn't hide from the fog or get lost in conspiracy theories, but actually confront it.
Exactly. Ask the tough questions, do the research, and try to understand what's really going on, both in the world around us and within ourselves.
So instead of being a symbol of uncertainty and fear, this fog can actually be a catalyst for something positive.
A catalyst for change, for growth, for a deeper understanding of who we are and where we're headed as a society.
I like that. Turning fear into fuel. That's a powerful message.
And it's a message we all need to hear, especially in times like these.
So, dear listener, as we wrap up this deep dive into the fog,
Remember to keep looking up, stay curious, and don't let fear cloud your vision.
the world is a strange and wondrous place full of mysteries and challenges.
But it's also full of opportunities for growth and discovery.
So, embrace the unknown, question everything, and never stop learning.
Until next time, keep exploring the fog, both literal and metaphorical.